Well, I'd like to start off this video by offering a cheers to you all. You know what? 2018 is coming to an end. We're moving into 2019, and we can say a lot of words about this year. Some good, a lot bad, however ways you want to put it, but you know what? At least we made it through. Here's to a new year. Cheers. So, I was thinking I wanted to do a final video in 2018, into 2019 on Critter Miss, and I was thinking, what should I do? I could do something infamous, but I don't want to end on a sour note, you know? Like, I even thought about doing Fatal this time, but, I don't want to talk about asshole circumference moving into 2019, and also a mix of that with a sour taste in my mouth is not the best, combination of analogies. So, how about we do this? Instead, let's start off 2019 with a happy note. A note on one of my favorite RPGs out there, one of my all-time favorites, and of course it's in World of Darkness, and we haven't talked about Vampire yet, but it's not Vampire. As you can tell by the screen, it is Hunter the Reckoning.
Lights top when you're in PC. Lights rock when you depend on me. To give you weapons, items, armor, information for your journey, and still you still machine and try to hurt me. Lights top when you're in PC. Lights rock when you.
So full admission here. As far as favorite games are concerned, we can talk about D&D and Vampire and whatnot, and especially whenever, let's just, leave it right now at World of Darkness games, for the sake of simplicity. Now, whenever it comes to World of Darkness games, and this includes old and new, Under the Reckoning actually, competes with Vampire for my favorite game in the entire series, and that is not a joke or hyperbole at all. I love this game. I think it is one of the best games out there, and it's honestly one of my favorites. Often it competes with Vampire, but for the sake of, going back and forth, I think that Vampire is going to win out just due to a number of different very strange factors I'm taking in, friends who play it, discussions, things to find online, very weird things, but Vampire tends to win out. But to give you an idea here, I'm maybe just a little bit of a fan when it comes to Hunter. So whenever it comes to the Critter Miss at the end of this video, you could probably take a guess on where we're going, but spoilers for right now. Hunter the Reckoning is a painfully underrated game that I feel like the majority of the World of Darkness community tends to overlook, usually for the tried and true underdog games like Changeling the Dreaming, or your, typical fan favorites like Vampire, Werewolf, and Mage. And what's even more upsetting than that, the fact that it kind of gets overlooked as also the underrated game TM, which always goes to Changeling, and for good reason, is just the fact that there is I know for a fact, a huge subsection out there that does not like Hunter, often regards it as the weakest of the World of Darkness line, and you have every right to be wrong. In the same line that includes, things like Kindred of the East and whatnot. Nah, Hunter is one of the underrated best games, but, let me explain to you why it is so good, which, is my job here after all. So how about we start with the premise before we move on to the other juicy details. Hunter the Reckoning is essentially a superhero game if you really look at it. One day, almost at random, people began to become imbued with powers to fight off the forces of darkness in the World of Darkness universe. After centuries of werewolves, vampires, zombies, geists, mages, changelings, and so forth, wreaking havoc on the world and controlling humanity's lives, people began to gain superpowers to fight off the forces of darkness in the name of humanity. I mean, it sounds really cool, right? Like, all of a sudden, just this, like, cavalcade of, like, super beings with powers to take on vampires, and werewolf shows up out of nowhere. I mean, it sounds like one of the best ideas out there. Like, you know, this game is going to be so much fun. And then that's whenever, like, things go pant-shitting wrong in a very quick way. You see, these people were not exactly the world's best and brightest. I mean, well, some were. But the point being is that it almost seemed at random. People would get imbued at the same time who would be completely weird and arbitrary. A police officer and a convict would become imbued at the same time. Even in one of the stories, you had a convict and two security guards getting imbued with an arsonist, a rapist, and a serial killer. All things considered, this is not the tried and true group. You'd even have, like, let's say, like a corporate stooge, a law professor, and a group of hippies all becoming imbued at the same time. You would have far right-wing conservative nutballs who bombs abortion clinics become imbued right next to staunch pacifists. It was a mixed bag of people who were getting imbued that seemed almost completely and totally random. And worse yet, there was also no way to communicate with each other. You didn't know who was imbued and who was not, except maybe the people who were around you. I mean... And just imagine this, like, there's no communication hub, there's nobody in a leadership role. Just one day this all happens, while other people are not. Society is still going on just fine, and suddenly you can see that the cashier in front of you is a zombie who is feeding off the life forces of other people or something like that. And suddenly you now have to take a bat and beat this guy to death whenever there's a police officer standing right next to you. It was really interesting stuff. It's playing off interesting social roles and whatnot. It's imagine this. Here's a good analogy for it. Imagine an army, just any army, spawns out of nothingness, and the army is selected at random, and I mean absolute random. Like, you might have 2 or 3 soldiers, but then you have, like, an accountant, you have a professor, you have a janitor, all these other people, and there is no leadership. All you know is that it says, fight the bad guys. And those are your only instructions. Nothing else. Everything else is just completely random. You're in a world of fucking hurt. So with nowhere else to turn and no leadership, these groups began to try to get together. The most popular of which was being on an internet base called the HunterNet, where they proceeded to argue and bicker and die in rapid order. There was absolutely no camaraderie. Everybody was just in chaos. And luckily, this game comes out right as the internet is really booming, so it plays a lot with chat groups, forums, and so forth. This is essentially the plot of Hunters. You're a group of humans from different walks of life, different social status, different economic groups, different ways of life entirely, and you all have to find a way to work together against a common enemy, an enemy that can sometimes even itself seem invisible. And you really have nothing to go on, no orders to do. While all at the same time, you have to, like, balance your social life that you had before with your new hunter life. Imagine having 3 kids and a wife or a husband, or just, you know, a partner, and every day you have to go out at night and go hunt vampires without maybe your partner and your kids ever really knowing. What happens if the kids get involved? It's the superhero conundrum as well. So, you have a lot of really interesting social dynamics at play here. Hunters have 7, well really 9, but we'll get into that in a second, designations or creeds to classify them. These 7 are separated into 3 categories, or other words, virtues, which is mercy, zeal, and vision. The mercy virtue, which includes hunters that classify as innocents, redeemers, and martyrs, are those who see supernaturals as something that needs to be understood. The bad guys need to be reformed, and there needs to be a report. There needs to be some human contact here, and a willing to give them a fighting chance, not just instantly classifying them as evil. Zeal is more of the soldier group that includes judges, avengers, and defenders. These hunters are the ones who really are here to fight the good fight, defend what is theirs, and also to assess the good and evil of these supernaturals. Their job is to be the fighters. They're not so much here to make reply, they are here to do and die. Finally, you have the vision virtue, which includes the visionaries. And these are more philosophical of the groups, sometimes leaders but not always such, asking the bigger questions that others might be afraid to discuss. For those of you uninitiated, you might be asking yourself a couple of questions, especially whenever you're thinking of a group of people having to work together against a common enemy. Number one, who is the communication expert? Who's the one getting these people together? And number two, who are the leaders? Who are the ones who are actually calling the shots? Who are the generals? These are some very good questions. You also might be asking why the vision virtue only has one creed in it. Well, those three questions altogether are the reason why hunters are as fucked as they are. There's also two lost creeds, those being the hermits and the waywards. The hermits are meant to be the communication experts that gather the hunters together, and the waywards were meant to be the generals. They were meant to be the leaders of this entire resistance. However, the hermit's power, which allowed them to sense imbue hunters, now causes them uncontrollable pain and static in their heads whenever they are near one. And it also just so happens that the ones that were imbued with these hermit powers were social recluses. Those who typically were very, very heavily introverted and did not really talk to people in the first place. Alright, oops. So, number one, we're already screwed here. There's no communication. So we get to the second group, which is the waywards. And the waywards are what can best be described as Avengers on a mix of speed and crack. While the Avengers are ready to fight the good fight, and ready to cry havoc and let slip the dogs of war, the waywards take all of this to the next level. The Avengers are there to preserve life. The waywards are there to do whatever the cost type of person. Whatever the cost needs to be paid is what they're willing to pay. They have been driven mad by their power. These are the guys that will bomb an orphanage center with also adorable puppies and kittens in the basement to be adopted because a vampire might be in there. Might. And if not, well, all those dead children, puppies, and kittens were noble sacrifices for the common good. So yeah, I mean, the hunters are pretty well fucked. On a monumental level, the way that I kind of see it is that they're kind of like, imagine a 13-year-old gets a whole bunch of powers and can now take on the bullies that are around them but can't really do anything else beyond that. They're powerful on a one-on-one basis against a vampire or against a werewolf or something like that. But in the grand scheme of things, hunters tend to be their worst enemies due to the fact that they are set adrift. They have no idea who they are, what their purpose is, who sent them, or what their mission is. They have a bunch of powers and they don't really know what they're supposed to do with it and constantly fight with one another for these exact reasons. So they're pretty well stuck in a rut that they just can't seem to get out of, really. And that's one of the best parts about Hunter. This is like the essence of Hunter, is that there is this glimmer of hope for the human race in this horrific, like, world of darkness where vampires and werewolves and all these other things control the world around them. And now they have these powers, but they have no way to direction it. They have no way to control it. It's just a chaotic force that seems to be bouncing off the wall like a pinball. As long as the werewolves and the vampires and so forth duck, then they should be okay. It's really good. It's kind of the essence of World of Darkness, in my opinion. It is that glimmer of hope in this giant world of darkness. The premise is great and the gameplay itself is also wonderful. It does have the standard World of Darkness format, which is still, in my opinion, one of the best systems to ever be devised. But it also allows you freedom to pick and choose the powers that you want and is based on your drive and conviction to finish the task at hand. Each group has a power tree. Innocents have one, Defenders have one, and so forth, of 1 to 5 powers, once again similar to Vampire. And they are also separated into the virtues, Zeal, Vision, and Mercy. You just have to ensure that your dots and mercy are always the primary set attribute, and they are never usurped by one of the other ones. Beyond that, someone who is an innocent, who is on the mercy virtue, can still take an Avenger-style edge, is what they're called. These Avenger powers. So you can really start to play with these powers and start to really mix with a lot of what you want to construct your character in a way that doesn't exactly let you in other World of Darkness games. So we've talked about a little bit of the premise, who you are, where you're going, as well as a little bit of the gameplay itself. And really, I'll be honest with you here, I could gush about this for an hour. I can really talk about the intricacies of these books that are currently sitting by my feet right here. I mean, I could really just like go through all of these. But at the end of the day, what do I have to say about this to keep this video short? Well, this game's a crit. Hunter the Reckoning is an undervalued game in the World of Darkness line. It is a game that gives humanity a fighting chance in a world while simultaneously cutting the legs out from under them. There is a fool's hope about the game that truly shines, and you can even have a bit of a superhero concept to it that is more dark and morose than your typical superhero game affairs. Overall, Hunter is a phenomenal game and worth any shot from especially people who love the World of Darkness line. This game, it's easily a crit. Like I said, it's one of my favorites. It's the game that I typically play for World of Darkness even today. Vampire and Hunter are the games that always pop up whenever I'm ready to build a game. So, with that being said, I want to say this was a really good way for me to end 2018 for Crit or Miss, with sharing with you all one of my favorite games for you all to also enjoy, hopefully to pick up as well. Thank you all so much for watching, for supporting, for following this channel. Thank you especially to my patrons who follow me on Patreon. And please, if you also really like the show and you have like a few dollars that you can spare, please follow me on Patreon. You know, support the show. I promise that we have a lot to come in 2019. Thank you all so much for watching, and I look forward to another great year with Crit or Miss. Thank you all so much. Have a good night, and a Happy New Year.